The entire set 5 for Star Wars Unlimited has been revealed. Legends of the Force is here, and we're here today to break down the leaders and rank them for you. I'm Jordan from the Colorado Cantina Crew, joined once again by Kyle and Sharky. The boys are together and stuff like that, right?
I mean, we're
back
here
in town
right?
finally.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks. We did some traveling, had some gameplay, had a great stream last week for the Colorado Springs PQ that Kyle participated in. Sharky was out of town. We'll talk about that a little later on. Great 11 hours to cover. I mean, it's easy to say, less easy to do, but we had a great time. Josh from Next Gen Gaming makes it easy for me to sit here, talk about some good games and watch some friends play. Today we're going to be arguing over some leaders, if they're good, bad, indifferent, or anything along those lines. We're in the lead up to Galactic Championship, boys. We've been practicing kind of probably for the past 3 weeks. We've been kind of ignoring set 4 a little bit in our team testing and our gameplay, and we've been in the lab, we've been building things, we've been testing things. Generally speaking, before we dive into all of our lists, how do you feel about the leaders as they fit in? No one in particular, but are you underwhelmed, overwhelmed? Kyle, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think in general, kind of like Jump to Lightspeed, I think there's going to be a couple leaders that are going to break into the meta. You're going to see them around, but in a very general sense, the vast majority are probably not going to see competitive play. I think the interesting part here, though, is that we're seeing a lot of new characters that people have like real attachments to,
Sure.
Right? People really love some of these characters, and they're gonna play them, right? They're gonna force them onto the table, and I think that's awesome because we're gonna see a little more diversity, just because people want to try to make some of these characters work. But in a general sense, from a competitive perspective, yeah, I don't think many of them are gonna see top table play. It's pretty typical.
I think your first point is what's really important about a game like Star Wars Unlimited. It's not Magic. It's not a game that has its own IP that's creating its own world and also collaborating with other IP out there. IP meaning intellectual property. Like, this is something that people are super invested into. Personally, I've never played Knights of the Old Republic, the video game. I played Battlefront and stuff, but I've never played the RPG. So it's like a lot of people on our team, Kyle and Sharky included, Kyle Sharky, he was hopeful that Cal Kestis would be awesome, right? Because of the connection to that game. Or, excuse me, was it Darth Revan? See, this is how much I know about the game. Right. But there's others who like love books and love the comic books from the High Republic, and then they see Avar and they're super excited, right? So there's a mix of all that good stuff, and that's kind of the magic of what Star Wars is overall. Sharky, what about you? What are your general thoughts?
I kind of agree with Kyle on the, at least in terms of what breaks into the popular meta. We're going to see maybe a leader or two that succeed at that level. That being said, I do think that the game is going in such a direction that with enough reps and practice, you can make nearly any leader work, which is very interesting. So like
Sure.
The popular ones I think will be pretty popular, but outside of that, you're going to see a lot of decks that are either forced or developed because of the character that they have. So like you mentioned earlier, I actually loved Knights of the Old Republic. So I was really hopeful for Darth Revan, even if I haven't found the secret sauce to make him work yet. But that doesn't mean that there won't be people trying to develop him because they love the character.
Sure.
Or in Avar Chris's case, like same kind of thing. And I think that each of them brings something. Well, I'd say the majority of them bring something relatively new and nuanced to play the decks differently than the leaders of the same color from previous sets. So we'll see what actually ends up breaking into the competitive meta, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a pretty wide swath of them at least represented in the tournament scene as a whole.
Yeah, I think we also need to keep in mind that we keep this through the lens of rotation, right? So right now you're comparing this, when and what might be played to a
Sure.
larger set of competitive leaders, like established competitive leaders. It's always going to be fun once rotation happens to come back around. Some of these ones that might just not quite make it yet or not have the support yet or outshined by a previous leader, could see, real competitive play just down the road.
Yeah. Anything could happen. Will it happen? That's the fun of life, right? We see if it works. For instance, like last set when we saw the leader reveal as a token Sabine player, I was really excited to see Kaz. I was really excited to see Von Reg, a 4-cost deploy, 5 health. Like this is good stuff. Because of that, I went back and watched the Resistance television show. Now I have hope for rotation. Maybe Sabine goes away and then Kaz gets a little boost. Let's quit with the pleasantries and dive into our first tier list. Sharky, we'll start with you, and we'll Kyle and I will sit back and get ready to make fun and criticize and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, you absolutely should be. So the tier list that I'm seeing needs to scroll up a little bit, actually. The top of the tier list that I have, at least in terms of strictly the leaders of this set, I think Kit Fisto and Kylo have the most potential. The testing has shown that they've been pretty good. Kit, as we mentioned, I think in some of the leader reveals a couple episodes ago, has been surprising me continuously, and at this point somehow still continues to surprise me, even though we've had a lot of games with him now. Moving to the next tier, I do think Talzin is the strongest of those bunch, but I've seen some interesting play lines from both Third Sister and Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan being able to make just normal things bigger is sort of Tarkin-esque, but you don't have to pay any resources for it.
Yeah.
And that ends up being pretty strong. The next tier down I consider to be the potential tier. They all have things that can make them broken if you can make them work consistently. And these are ones I haven't actually done a lot of testing with, but their abilities are at least strong in a vacuum. The next tier down, I'm going to point out, I don't think either Revan or Anakin have builds there, but I would like to see both of them succeed because of the interesting design space in which they fill, right? They're very new, only colorless leaders here. I haven't seen it yet. I also think that there might be something to someone who can just play Sentinels everywhere and muck everything up like Ahsoka.
Sure.
The rest of them are kind of just my gut feeling, as in they're not as bad as the two at the bottom. And the two at the bottom, I'm holding a coaster right here, and it might be more valuable than those two leaders in terms of gameplay. I have not seen it. I don't get it. It could just be a me thing, but I don't see them going anywhere other than popular characters, which is kind of unfortunate that both of them are fairly popular in their own little niche.
Yeah. Kyle, what are your glaring holes here? What are the things that stand out to you the most?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see my tier list here coming up. I think towards the top section here, we're in basic agreement, right? So I'm not going to pick at that too much. Same goes for the bottom. So if I want to pick at this a little bit, it's going to be in kind of the center area. I think you push down a couple further than I would. We'll see about that. So, maybe giving them a little more hope towards seeing some play. And I guess I'll compare those to some current leaders and how they've, worked. And so how that might work. But, in a general sense, we're not too far apart here. Avar, I don't know about that one, but I want to pick on that one when we get to Jordan.
Yeah, I think Avar will be a major topic of conversation today as we break through the possibilities and break things down. What I find interesting overall, and I'll spoil a little bit, generally speaking, we're all kind of agreement in the D tier. We all think, the three of us, that Rey and Cal are the two weakest leaders. And generally speaking, we're probably the highest on Kylo and Kit to varying degrees. What I find to be kind of encouraging, and hear me out when I say kind of, is that the leaders that we are the most excited about aren't vastly outnumbered from the leaders that we're the most disappointed about, right? And I think that from a general perspective, that's kind of the area you want to be in, right? Like, you don't want the worst of the bunch to be better than the best of the bunch, right? And I think that's been an issue with card design in this game, going back since set one. Basically, there was a great video, and I'll get the link and I'll put it in the show notes. I forget who it was from, but I sent it to our Discord last week, and we were talking about the basic showcase and legendary prices from each set and how many there are and your hit rates of getting them. And basically, since set one, we've seen a nosedive of value, which to me shows what people are interested and not interested in. And what I like to see is a couple leaders really, really driving up that ability to say, hey, I want to go play this game for the first time. Hey, I really want to go play limited this week, right? Where in some sets, it feels like that's just not the case.
Yeah, I think one thing we should point out is this tier list is for premier play, right? Obviously, if we're playing in limited play, we have some differing opinions. I mean, not all leaders need to be viable in competitive or, top table play. There are always going to be leaders that just make a lot more sense in a limited format. I'm looking at like a Snoke's, some of these ones here on the list, right? So I guess we should have mentioned that, but keep in mind, we're talking from a competitive table perspective, right? So, some of these leaders have their place, right? Maybe for twin Twin Suns, maybe for, draft, that sort of thing. So, that's cool.
Yeah. So for me, Sharky, I would say the biggest gaps between our assessment here is really with two leaders in particular, and that's one with Anakin and the other with Talzin. Let's talk about Anakin first, because I think seeing Anakin as far down as he is in your list, which would be right over here, which is yours. You're in C. I kind of spoiled mine a little bit. This is mine. I have him in the end of A. So that's a pretty big gap. And when you think about it, I wonder if I'm too lofty, if I'm putting too much in the what could be, and maybe you're kind of viewing it through more of a pragmatic, like what is right now lens.
That's probably true, because I actually want Anakin to succeed. I want this to be a good leader. And I got to figure there's somewhere out there you can crack him. But every list I have seen, both building and playing against, I'm just sitting here and asking the question, why don't I just play a villainy deck? There's not a lot that I have seen to be like, oh, so I have to spend extra steps to cast Overwhelming Barrage? Okay. And I know that's a little reductionist. Like, there's probably a lot of nuance to it that would require a lot more time than I've spent on him. I just haven't seen one break through, even against my decks that I consider to be on the maybe not D tier, but my lower tier, still in development decks are beating the crap out of every Anakin I run across. And so, again, I'd like to see it happen. I haven't yet, and it's got me a little discouraged on how strong he is, at least in the current moment.
I'll say, when I first read Anakin, we were on Discord together. I thought, this leader is broken. This is way too good. Everybody's going to play this. But that, from a theoretical perspective, right? I think that changed a lot when you actually sat down and said, okay, let me try to build the deck. What actually goes in here? And you realize it's only a limited pool of cards that you really want to play from out of aspect. And even then, to your point, now I'm giving up a second aspect to do so, right? It ends up being way less impactful as you thought. It feels very Chancellor Palpatine, right? When Chancellor Palpatine was revealed, I thought, oh my goodness. And then you try to make it work, and you realize, it kind of doesn't work, not to the extent you would hope that it would have. The other thing we got to remember with him is, right now, we're in a part of the meta where you're going to have almost one of the largest card pools available to you. He probably gets worse with rotation, right? Because some of those cards you really want to play, Overwhelming Barrage, Palpatine's Return, some of these, cards, they're going to rotate out. And so now you're going to have even less of a card pool to try to make him work, which is really going to be a bummer. I think his true calling, at least for me, is going to be playing like a double yellow Chancellor Palp Anakin Twin Suns deck, where my sole goal is to take out my own youngling Padawans, right? That's what
yeah.
So I think part of the disconnect here is that Sharky and I don't want to speak for you, Sharky, out of term, but I've never played Twin Suns. I don't think you have either, right?
I have not.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe that's true. We're eventually going to do it. Maybe sometime next November or something like that. We'll check the schedule, see how it goes. But I agree with you. And we did sit down and we said, okay, what are the cards? And we kind of said, okay, well, one of them is probably Power of the Dark Side, right? Another of them is Overwhelming Barrage, as you mentioned. A third card from there is likely Super Laser Blast. Oh, we said, oh man, that's really what these grindy hero decks have been missing, a way to reset the board, right? And then from there we said, okay, what, like No Good to Me Dead? Frozen and Carbonite, maybe? Like, what else really is there that I haven't mentioned that makes you want to do that? And that's all well and good. And I agree with your point, Kyle, about that narrow window that we have to make sure that in the next year, we have to say, is it more likely that more villainous cards that are events or upgrades or otherwise that are not units get printed for Anakin to use? Or is it more likely that in the time before rotation happens that we don't get those cards? I would probably say...
So one of the things...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
So one of the things I want to point out, though, is I think the way to make Anakin work involves using all of the different colors of villainy stuff. So, yeah, he's only one color in heroism, usually. Finding out the pairing is probably tough there, but you can use all of the villainy non-units regardless of the other color of your base. And I think the potential there is cool. That's all I want to point out. Is like all of those cards that we just named are all across the spectrum of color. However, is it still just better than a 2-color villainy deck? I don't know.
It's hard to say.
Yeah. Right now, I think the obvious pairing for your heroism side is blue, right? Because you get Luke, you get all these really powerful heroism blue, cards. But then your out of aspect stuff you're getting is removal. Well, for heroism, your decent removal is blue, right? So it's like I don't need that additional removal per se, right? So that kind of means, all right, well then I probably don't want to do blue. I want to do a different color. But then, the units are just not as good. So, I want to see somebody really succeed with this. I think it's really cool. I imagine the showcase is going to be amazing. But at least in my efforts so far, it's been fun, not great.
Yeah. And you know what else? I'm not surprised to hear that. I felt the same way too, but it's very possible that this sort of build just isn't an obvious build, isn't a start of set build. That's why I have it in the area where I do, and I'll pull up my list now as we head over back to the screen share. Personally, I don't have anything in S tier right now, but I do have Anakin at the end of A tier because I think that a lot is possible. And maybe I'm leaning too much into the what could be in this list, and maybe that's reflected with my ranking of Avar as well, right? But
I would love to come back later and be able to be like, yeah, you were right.
Hey, I always like being right. So I like being able to say that as well. So that's why I have Anakin there, right? Okay. And then to start off my list, let's talk about Talzin just as we close things up with you too, Sharky. I think that she's really good. I really like how you have to play around her ability to be able to take out 1 and 2 health remaining units. It reminds me a lot, and this wasn't the strongest meta play, but in the Bobby Yellow decks, especially when TDR was around, it really reminds me of how you have to protect your units going into Talzin as you kind of would playing around IG 2000, because you'd say, oh, well, I have this 5 health unit. I'll just put 4 on it. Okay, all of a sudden, IG 2000 comes down and wipes your board, right? I think that's kind of the stuff that happens here. I do think, though, that she's missing a couple units, right? Like, you have the mid-range units. I think it's Karis, and then the defender or assassin rather, that really helps you use that that minus ability when you have the force. But I think instead of the old DACA, like the 6/6 that currently allows you to play stuff from the discard pile, I wish there was another one of those abilities that maybe was like a -3 or a -4 or something along those lines. The way I see this deck working is kind of combining with Snoke or just really leaning into those minuses. And I just haven't seen it fire enough yet for me to confidently have it in that top group.
I tend to flicker between A and B for Talzin. A lot of the stuff that she's good against is actually really strong in the meta right now. Actually, she's pretty good into Vader Yellow, for example.
Interesting.
I think she does pretty well into Sabine. That being said, she's also almost Piet reminiscent of a game plan that you can shut down if you know how to fight it. So there's some strong points to her, and I think that there is a deck that can succeed very well with her. However, if basically it's like, so I'm going to make a quick hockey reference here. Basically, if you figured out a goal, you can score a goal way too often. And she feels almost to me like there's at least potential that happens. Okay, if you figure out how to play against Talzin, you just beat Talzin every time. And so I can see where you're coming from in terms of like, yeah, she's there, but she's not quite there.
Yeah. And you could get her stuff going, right? Where like, let's just compare to Avar really quick. Like for Avar to work and be very strong, she needs to thread the needle and really, really take her strength, right? Her strength, the high end of her strength is much more powerful, in my opinion, than the high end of Talzin's strength. But Talzin gets there a lot easier, right? Talzin has a lot of synergistic cards that allow you to take advantage of it every turn. Is that peak power enough, though, Kyle?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the challenge with Avar, and you're going to see her way lower on my list.
But we're talking about Talzin. Give it a break. Let's finish up with
man, I was ready to rip Avar.
He was so ready.
You were talking peak Avar strength, and I don't see anything. Talzin, I haven't played Talzin myself, but I've played against a lot of Talzin and been surprised at the ability to control the board. But I think you're exactly right. At least in the games that I've seen so far, Talzin is kind of doing the control thing, kind of mid-game doing the control thing, really, suppressing what I'm trying to do, but then just kind of peters out with that, that top end, or, kind of loses control of things and then is never able to fully recover. So it's an interesting ability. You're kind of trying to do a little bit of a control thing, but I feel like you're right. You just don't get there in the end. But these are early builds, right? I've been surprised. This is Villain Blue, right? I haven't seen Avengers. I haven't seen, some of these big impact cards coming down, and maybe it's going to need some of that to kind of close out the game after kind of getting that early to mid control.
And that's a big point for all of these decks, I think, right? Like, we talk about Kit, we talk about Kylo as the two things that we're the most confident in right now, but they need to be pressure tested in space, right? Like, Kit has some tricks up his sleeve with his ability being able to ping, directionally every single turn in a perfect world. Kylo, on the other hand, has some difficulties dealing with it the same way that a lot of blue-green villain decks do, right? But as we go over to the back to the Avar discussion, because I know Kyle's raring to go on that, I'll dive into why I think she's really cool, right? I am not someone that ever wants to deploy a leader late. Like, I think that 6 leaders are too late for me, generally speaking. I like to stay 5 and below. I've had the most success with Sabine and I guess Django in my competitive career in Star Wars. But even the controlled style decks that I was playing back in the day, I really preferred Bosk over Iden, I want to get out, right? I want to have that impact. Kyle mentioned Chancellor Palpatine earlier. I was really high on the art, especially on that showcase, but I thought, wow, this would be really cool. Like, maybe this is an aggro leader. Maybe I'm pinging every turn. Maybe I'm healing. Maybe I'm winning races. But I think what we all realized was the act of flipping your leader in Star Wars Unlimited is such a big swing, right? If it works really well, and we want to take advantage of that. So all of that nonsense and preamble put aside, the reason that I think Avar is great is because she could be an 8-10, potentially on resource 6. Potentially is the key word there, right? So I've been doing a lot of testing with Avar Red specifically. The team, we've worked on it a little bit. It's one of those decks that we find to be like interesting, that might be able to get there, but probably won't be. But when you do get there, when you do ramp into Consular, into ETH Koth, or be able to activate multiple force uses a turn with, Sorceress Blast, or not even playing a unit with Jedi Consular or anything along those lines, when you get her out, even as late as Resource 7, she's a problem, right? The choice is either, hey, you could spend your whole turn dealing with her, maybe Rivals Fall at 6, maybe something else. An OB isn't taking her out, right? Like, it's not a one action play. A power can, but another reason why I think that this archetype is so interesting right now is because we've entered into this phase where there's so much action cheating, there's so much resource cheating, and there are ways to reload a board really quickly. For instance, there are multiple ways at Resource 5 to get Keller and Beck out, whether it's General's Blade on a Jedi Consular getting you to spend 2 less, and then all of a sudden you get Keller and Beck and a 3-cost unit or less. Even worst case scenario, you get a Gunji, right? All of a sudden you have 12 HP of health on your board going into potentially your flip turn. So the reason why all these things are important to me is because I really do feel that if we're able to crack that code of cycling, of searching through your deck, of playing units, maybe even a card like Bounty Hunter's Quarry has a place here. I don't know if it does, but it might. These are the areas where I find it really interesting. And then to lead it off, like, there are so many cards that are super, super strong right now that only work when you could constantly have the Force, right? The top of that list, I think, being Kiadi, right? Then you have Mace Windu, right? But the other kind of heavy hitters that you have is Yoda, right? Sharky, we've played some games where you put Yoda down and you're pinging for 9, right? Like, you have 4 units out, 3 units out. You're doing a lot of damage while healing. Combine that with the daughter. If you're able to slam a daughter and Yoda, you're probably not losing that game, right? So there is a lot of could be, maybe, kinda in the future, but that's I think, all that being said, her maybe, could be, kinda is stronger than anyone else's in the set. Will we get there? The jury probably would say no, But if we do, it's going to be huge, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I just don't see it at all. To me, this is like Yoda leader, right? It's a big, fat, late dropping leader that's not going to happen, right? Maybe it does happen every now and then. There has been a Yoda or two out there you've seen on stream at some big tournament. That could be said true of lots of different leaders can pop off out of nowhere, right? But from a consistency perspective, this leader's not going to do it for you, right? I'm going to flip on 5 is Magic Fairylands. That might happen once, right? 6, probably also not going to happen. Every now and then it does. You're probably flipping on 7, or every now and then you're going to be flipping on 8, which is really going to feel bad, right? So I just, from a consistency perspective, I don't see it. If you played Magic back in the early days, I played in like 93 to 95.
Yeah, Sharky and I were both single digits at that point. So.
yeah. But this felt like Crawworm, right? Like it's like oh, cool. I want to get to my big giant thing and then hopefully have it happen, right? Like you're probably gonna be dead before you get to your big giant thing. Every now and then you will get to your big giant thing, and then what'll happen is I'll just ECL out the new Vader and kill it immediately, or some other form of removal. So you're like, I did the thing. I got to the big impactful, scary Avar, and on my next action, I immediately kill it, right? Yeah. So I just feel like the payoff is going to happen so infrequently, and even when it does, chances are you're going to get removed anyway, that I just don't see a consistent winning strategy here. Now, back to our earlier discussion around people love the High Republic, people are going to love Avar Chris, and they really just want to play her. I'm sure we're going to see it for that reason, and I'm sure there's going to be some wins here and there, just like we've seen with Yoda in the past. But to me, this is no different than the Yoda leader, so you're going to see it about as often as you see Yoda.
So I do think it is different than the Yoda leader, just to be fair, right? I have tracked all my games. I track all of my data using a spreadsheet that I use. So far, we are deploying on 5 very infrequently. Yesterday was the first time I've ever deployed on a resource 5. I was at resource 7. He was at 5. I had ramp twice. 6, though, deploying on 6 is at 35%. Right?
Okay, so still terrible.
That's not terrible, I don't think.
That's 35% is way less than half. That's still like in the not happening.
6 is super ideal. 6 is 3 turns prior to her flip, right? Like 6 is really good. 7 is 45%. Right. Okay, and then the rest are mixed in from there. I think if you're flipping on 6, if we're able to get that to that 45 range, that's really good. And the other question is like, there are situations where you can flip early, but should you flip early? Right. Like there are situations where I could really extend from 6 to get out there, but I don't have the board to support her. What I've really liked doing is being able to go General's Blade into Yoda, or Counselor into Yoda, or have Caloran Beck just playing at 7 or something along those lines, just so there are multiple threats going on. Overall, I'm really excited to look back at this and see how it goes. The differences between Yoda, I think, outside of the Restorer, is that like once she's out, she really is a threat. She's an 8-10, versus a 4-9. It's a pretty big difference. The Restore from Yoda is really strong. His on-flip ability is really strong too. And like you said, people do really love Avar. I've read some of the High Republics. I didn't really like her, to be honest. I thought she was kind of annoying. But like people do really like her. I think the showcase is going to be gorgeous the way that they have that set up. And so overall, I think I'm excited. This is the leader that I'm the most excited to see in 6 months, 8 months, where things are out. Does she see any play, a little play, some play? And also just this concept of cheating things out, playing these units that have interconnected actions, the Yodas, the daughters, the things like that. I've been trying to find a leader that I think is best suited to fit this. So far, I think Avar is the best. Maybe Luke 1 is interesting to me. I don't think that Ahsoka is strong right now, but she's someone on the list that I think I should try, because maybe those Sentinels help you grind that mid game a little bit stronger. But Shark, you've been mostly sitting by as Kyle and I honestly kind of surprisingly have a cordial conversation. First time for everything. Kyle, Sharky, what are your thoughts on Mama Avar?
So there's like 2 things for me that stick out about Avar. And I think one of the things that I've noticed so far in testing, I've played some, and mostly I have tried playing the red version that you are also running. And it is the highs are the highest of any leader that we've seen so far. However, I don't think the deck needs to be judged based on the highs. You need to judge it based on probably the upper end of what you can realistically achieve. And so where I think Avar where the Avar players will really push their advantage is being able to make it so that they don't give a shit about getting Vader ECL.
Yep.
Right? There are times where you can say, yeah, I'm going to sell out and do everything I can to get Avar flipped on 5 and then immediately get killed.
Sure.
Whereas I think just having the threat there can be used to put yourself in a board state such that you really don't have to flip even until 6 or 7 or 8 if you really want to push it that late. The tools are there in Red Green Hero to make that happen. And I think you can also make an argument for Blue to also have those same tools.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question that I have is, can she recover from a board state that gets taken away? Because most of what she relies upon to get to that thing is to basically take control and like hold on to it as long as possible and get yourself into a spot where they just can't stop you.
Yep.
The real question for me will be, can she wrestle it back? Things like Keller and Beck early, things like that do seem like they have potential to do that. But if she can't, then I think she's going to run the same direction as Talzin in the, hey, look, we know the game plan against her and we just shut her down every time.
Yeah.
So I like to be hopeful on these. I think that there is a potential deck out there that can make it work. I haven't done as much work as you have on there, though, so I'm not confident in that being there yet.
Yeah, and I like, it's hard to say too, right? Because like in my games, I'm winning at a very, very high rate, right? Like my win rate with Avar is like 60% right now, right? But you know, like there's different levels of players that are doing different levels of testing at different stages of how long they've been looking at a set. So we try to take that information with a grain of salt and save the actual takeaways from our testing nights where we're working as a team and practicing there. But yeah, I think it's very interesting. Also, as we play other Force decks, I get very sad not just being able to meditate with the Force, right? Like I think
it's weird switching the leader you used to, right?
It's a really good ability. It's really great to be able to say, hey, I could do this regardless what you're gonna do, right? Like you could sell out to stop me from getting the Force. One of the things that we talked about Talzin, right, being a way to really slow that down. Where in this, it's like you could do what you want. I'm still gonna get it. Is that gonna be good? We'll see as we talk later. I'm excited to see how it goes. If we get her in pre-release, I don't know if she's gonna be worth playing, but I might be tempted. As we head back over to the list, I think another area that I'm a little bit different than you guys. Just comparing real quick. Actually, Kyle and I are both interested in. Oh, we all like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Okay. So we could talk about Obi. We could not talk about Obi. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think in a general sense, he's just good, right? You know, he's pumping out XP tokens.
Yep.
You know, Tarkin's seen a lot of play. Rey has seen a lot of play. I think he falls in that, you know, flip range. You know, he's actually a little earlier than Rey, but, you know, just an easy way to pump out tokens, press the advantage, get going. At least the deck I've been trying has been an Obi yellow.
Yep.
It feels a lot like Quinn ECL. You kind of get the swarm thing going on. Now you've got the tokens that are helping the swarm. You know, you're probably hitting General's Blades, trying to cheat stuff out. You're hitting Kelleran, that sort of thing. So, you know, it's felt generally good, but it's a fair deck, right? I'm not doing anything super broken with that deck. I'm playing fair. I'm flooding the board. You know, we're trying to get the win. I think it'll see consistent play. It's a consistent deck, right? Not amazing, not bad, just consistent. Going to be able to grind wins, that sort of thing. And you know, another one where if he's wearing his armor in the showcase, I'm going to be hunting that one down.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a cool showcase.
I think this is one of the leaders that we see have a really big potential to get a boost after rotation, right? Like,
oh, absolutely.
Here's a couple things that I don't think will ever go out of style. Action cheating, resource cheating, making units better for cheap whatever action economy is, right? Whether it's spending a resource or in this case, it's the first leader where we don't have to spend a resource to really start buffing our units. Kyle, you mentioned it's a fair deck. I would say there's like two unfair things that it does, and it's mostly on resource 2 or resource 3 rather, turn 2. Where if you start with a Padawan, the Youngling Padawan, you could buff him to be a 3/4, and then you could drop Vernestra or Falcon on turn 2, and you have 4/5s respective in ground or space. I think that's good. Is the unfairness enough? Probably not, right? You could also play General's Blade and stuff like that, similar to the Quinn ECL deck that we saw from Grumpy Elephant. Really, really fun deck, though. I think I'm really confident that at the end of this set we'll look back and we'll say, wow, we really liked being able to play Obi because we didn't have to play below curve to buff our units. I think that's one of the big differentiators, obviously, between the other experienced token based leaders.
I agree with that. And so I've been focusing mainly on Obi Blue, actually.
Interesting.
And I've tried both the rare base and the basic base, whatever it's called. And that one plays a little less fair, though I would say the consistency is a little further down on the curve. So the ideal play is obviously like stick Jedi Counselor on the field turn 1 and enable having the Force by just having a 4 health unit. And then you can start cheating things out that way. That's been a bit, I don't want to call it dreamland because it happens semi-consistently, but if you don't get that in that particular configuration of the deck, it kind of fizzles out. Whereas the attacking side of things, if you get Gunji out and start attacking with him, he becomes a real problem that they have to deal with while you then build your board back out as well. And you make the rest of the board relatively large. So those are two different styles, at least from the blue versus the yellow versions. I'd still say it's probably the most fair of the guys that all of us have in that A line. But I think that generally speaking, the lack of spend, like you pointed out a minute ago, lack of being under curve to be able to still get that effect is a very strong effect, and we'll see play. Now, he's probably just going to end up being the next Rey, right? Rey sees play and can be played at a very high level, but Rey isn't dominating a meta because there's at least some nuance on how to play her correctly.
Yeah, I mean, for the first time, we saw Data Vault really become a popular deck. Rey Tarkentown was always a powerful deck, but not necessarily a popular deck. I will say, though, just to your use of the blue base, I do think most of the rare bases kind of suck. But if I had to pick one that I think has some redeeming quality, it probably would be this rare blue base because of your ability to guarantee getting it on turn 1. I still think it sucks, but I think that if there was one that didn't suck, it would likely be that.
Yeah, totally agree on the rare bases.
Yeah,
as far as leaders in general go, I don't know if we want to try to do a quick pass on kind of the remaining leaders.
Yeah. Let's hop over to yours, Kyle. What's a list outside of the dog water area? We'll save that for last. What leader do you want to talk about the most?
Yeah. Pull up the list here, and I'll talk over a couple of them. I think I have a couple of opinions at least. I think there's nothing new to the top one, although I do want to press on Kit again. I think the thing that surprised me about him is just that leader ability. When you saw his flip initially, I kind of dismissed him a little bit because his flip side is really bad. I know Sharky likes to tell me how it's not always really bad. It's bad.
It's not a bad flip. It's not.
No, it's bad. But,
I like Saboteur.
His leader ability is so good. They had to. If his flip was better, he'd be broken. And he's still going to be very good, even with a bad flip, because that leader side is so good. And the part that I kind of discounted was your ability to control space if you need to with the leader ability, right? So some of these force decks, I think in general, the problem is going to be is that I'm focused on force. There's no force units in space. So to get force, I'm primarily on ground, which means I'm susceptible to a space attack. Well, that might not be true for Kit, right? Because I can kind of handle that with the ability and then some of the Jedi ships to enable. So anyway, very high on Kit.
Sure.
Kylo, the same. He's been real impactful. He's been a lot of fun, but we've already talked about him. I'm going to move down to Kanan. I think I have Kanan.
I like your Kanan choice here.
Okay, so Kanan feels a lot like Set 1 Luke. I'm not saying anything crazy there, but some of these creatures are way better than I gave them credit for and way more difficult and obnoxious to deal with. The Kanan that I'm going to play with first is going to be double blue Kanan.
Sure.
Because it kind of feels like when we were messing around with double blue Rey, but he could be extra obnoxious. Like any double blue deck, though, you're going to run into problems with top end. It's going to feel very controlly, but I just have been pleasantly surprised, and he's an area I want to put more attention to because I think there is possibility there. He may be one too that we see. Yeah, we may see even more possibility with him, down the road. He might be one of those leaders I have pumped up because of that. But as you go into the B tier here, I thought
let's talk about him for a second, though, because I do think there are some interesting nuggets. One, people just
actually like him too. Yeah,
people love Kanan, right? People love Rebels. The Spectre trade is always one that people like to mess with. But I think there's a few cards like Doom, Loth Wolf, Ogdo Bogdo, Oogie Boogie, and Ezra. Man, they make some really challenging starts to deal with, where things could really just get out of hand, right? Like, especially if you're playing a deck that needs to enable the Force. It could be really challenging if they stick a Lothwolf and they shield it, or they're playing Ezra and then Dune. You have to deal with these units so quickly, otherwise things get out of hand. And I do think that it is a little bit of a one-trick pony, but man, what it's doing is really interesting. Like, there's been some situations where there's been like an Ezra, a Doom, and an Ogdo Bogdo. Like what do you do in that spot, right? Because if you don't kill Dune, everything is getting, or Doom, I think it is, everybody's getting buffed up. If you don't kill Ezra, he's buffing everything up. And in the middle of that, you have a Sentinel that you could, shield, heal, or otherwise.
Yeah, so I think, at least in my opinion, Kanan feels very similar to Obi-Wan in the, if you let them snowball, they will get out of hand.
Yeah.
The reason for the difference for me is that I've seen Obi-Wan more consistently flood the board and take it over. Kanan still has that potential, and I actually played against a pretty good Kanan deck earlier, which was, I haven't seen one that isn't double blue that I thought was good, but double blue is very good.
Yeah.
And there's potential there for him to just be one of the best leaders in the set as well. I kept him a little lower because I hadn't seen it yet, but I can totally see where that might appear.
Yeah, if it's not double blue, it's probably blue-red, right? There's some really good red creatures. Isn't there like one that's like a 4/1 or whatever?
Yeah, the new turn 1 play, right?
Yeah, shielded 4/1 is pretty scary, right?
Yeah.
On turn 1. So, and then there's a lot of other interesting creatures that live kind of in red. So, it's probably double blue-red, but it's definitely one that I'm going to play around with. Anyway, as we move down to tier B, I had a kind of a clumped middle. We talked about this before. I think with JTL and some of the previous sets, there was just a huge pile of dog water at the bottom, whereas with this set, I think it is nice that we've got kind of a good middle section of, hey, maybe, right? We talked about Anakin before. I was excited for that. Qui-Gon, I think a lot of people were excited for. And of course, he'll be another one of those where it's like, I just love Qui-Gon. For him, I just haven't been able to make him work yet. Like when he works, you're like, oh, it all lined up and worked. That was so cool. But that just doesn't happen enough to, kind of make it worth it. Third Sister we talked about. I've seen some aggressive decks. A couple of these though, with just any time, to your point earlier, Jordan, that you can save on resources, you can resource cheat. There's potentially something there. Every leader that we've ever had that can cheat resources has seen some play, right? And so we've got that with two of the leaders here, with being able to cheat resources to play units or being able to cheat resources to play events, right? So that's why I've got kind of both of them in the middle there. Is just, I think, Barris, sorry, I should say their names, Barris and Morgan Elsbeth, they have a form of action or resource cheating, so maybe, right? Snoke, you're doing the experience thing again, right? You're giving yourself experience tokens. We've seen that work. His flip is a little delayed, so I think that's challenging, but it's in the realm of, maybe. Darth Maul, kind of like a ping deck, so I give him a chance, right? So we've seen that work. Ahsoka, she's like kind of like the Obi-Wan leader, the Sentinel Obi-Wan leader, or maybe more like the Lando leader. And both of those we've seen work a little bit, so she can be in the middle. And then the bottom half, I think you're just out on those. We already had the Avar discussion, but kind of the bottom 5, I put it in C just to make you feel a little better. But and then Revan and
just one symmetric.
and Grand Inquisitor there, I think are probably not going to happen. But they're not as bad as Rey and Cal, which are just unfortunately just terrible, right? Like I feel so bad for Cal because I know my wife was super excited. My brother-in-law was I know multiple people that were like, Cal Kestis, here we go. And then they just it's just so disappointing to have him just be just so bad. Like he didn't have to be that bad.
I think the base stat line for 4 deployed needs to be 2/5, or at least something 5, right? Like I'm not saying that we need to make all of them as good as Sabine with the 2+1 ping, but it just, you can't have, let's even Fennec. Like Fennec is awesome, but her having that 4 HP is really tough. When I first saw Third Sister, I was like, yep, I'm out on her. 4 HP. She's crawled back into my good graces a little bit more, but I think it's really important. And I think it is important to have good and playable 4-cost deploy leaders in the format, not only just for my own pleasure, but to keep control down, to have different types of play. I don't think it's a healthy game where we're seeing only 5 and 6 or even just 6, right? I want to see a range, and I think it creates some really interesting types of game flow. I will say, Kyle, like, you're out of your goddamn mind putting Anakin and Maul and Snoke and Elsbeth above Avar. I'm sorry, but like, come on. I could see Elsbeth with the potential, right, with the argument for like, hey, maybe resource cheating here could be awesome, but like, Maul seems pretty trash to me, and so does Snoke. I don't know why you would play Maul, right? Like, Kyle, you're making a face.
He might be a rotation candidate, but
I mean, Maul deals damage to multiple units, right? I mean, imagine a situation where I'm trying to fight off Vader pilots. Okay, action, use the Force, deal 1 damage to a unit and 1 damage to another unit. So you're saying use the Force, kill 2 TIE fighters is like horrible? You know,
I mean, that's one situation where I could see it being good, but
yeah, we just talked about how Kit is in our S tier because Kit has this ability that allows you to do 2 damage and control the board. Maul's ability is exactly the same, right? It's just that you're doing it to 2 different units, right? So using an ability that can go to either lane to control the board is not terrible. Right, so he has a very impactful, ability. It requires the Force, which is a little more challenging.
Got a point there.
Yeah, so I don't think Maul is
there's
terrible.
2 big differences here. One is it's 2 versus 1, and 2 is better than 1. The other is the Force.
No. It's 2 versus 2. It's
no
1
2
to 2
directed towards some. You can't put 2 on the same person with Maul, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, that's right. But there's going to be instances where I want it on 2 separate units.
Sure. And I would love to put 2 on 2 separate units too, Kyle. I want it all, right? But I do think that I think that outside of the fan stuff, like, oh wow, I really like Maul. I just don't see why you would play that even over Third Sister, and I don't even think that Hidden is that great right now. But we'll leave that conversation. We already went through it. The last one that I really want to hit on before we start talking about legendaries a little bit is Revan. And Revan's someone that is having the same problem with giving up ability, giving up aspects. I think that's a tough one. I will say that what I've seen with Revan at the top end, if you don't stop him from doing it, is really brutal. There's that new Sith card. I think there's only 2 or something along those lines, where you defeat all other units and then you give 2 experience tokens and 2 shields to Sith units. There's always 2. That's a really brutal situation. I also think that Tyrannus is a really good card, right? Like, I didn't really speak to me as much when I saw it leaked, but in practice, I think that's a card that probably will see play across the villainy spectrum. You know, just if you're using the Force and you need an ambush unit, I don't know why you wouldn't be playing him.
No, I agree with that.
You're giving up too much having only 1 aspect with Revan for an ability that is okay. You know what I mean? Like, I could just lane dodge you, right? I could prevent you from ever really using Revan's ability unless you're ambushing and ensuring that it's happening, right? So, like, if I'm going to give up an entire aspect, that ability better be, semi-broken, right? Like, even, like, we'll go back to Kit. Kit's ability is insane, right? Broken. And I don't have to give up an entire aspect to obtain it, right? Like, Revan is just not, he should probably have been down further.
He probably should have been designed a little bit differently, right?
Like, I like Revan, and I think he would actually succeed in a limited environment too. That might be where he's targeted as. I'm not sure, but it is very much one of those, like, his game plan might be even more linear than Piet, and I keep referring to Piet because he's like the gold standard for having a linear game plan that you can disrupt easily, and I think Revan's might even be easier. I like playing the blue Revan deck that I have. It's fun. It gets shut down on enough occasions to the point of it being like, why am I playing way too often? It's one of those, like, it's not even going 50-50 into the field. It's going like 60-40 into a small portion of the field and then getting wiped by a lot of it.
And that's never a good combo to have. But, we'll see how it all plays out. We'll circle back at the end of this set and we'll see who was wrong and who was right.
Is it cool if we cycle back to Cal real quick?
Yeah, please.
So I have one thought on Cal. I actually don't hate the 3-4 stat line. The thing for me for Cal is that he feels like he wants to be an aggressive leader. What seems to be counterproductive to that is the fact that he's basically playing tempo with his ability. The exhausted unit of their choice is kind of one of those where, like, well, I can see where it would happen in a race if you got out way ahead and then you're exhausting them and both sides were just throwing haymakers at the base. But because that's not typically how people fight against an aggro deck, including the control, even the mid-range, you're basically leaving it so that you're the only one running a race while the other side can just keep building a board and wipe you out. And that's my bigger problem than I think the 3-4 stat line. Just for what that's worth.
Yeah, I have a lot of issues with the 3-4 stat line. I think exhausting is powerful. Even going back, I played some Mando for fun. Obviously, Django is the best example. But I think that if they're trying to set up for a less aggressive game after rotation, that's a good step in the right direction. If they're trying to maintain the status quo with aggression pushing up and hopefully pushing out control, I think that's what a lot of people hope counterbalance each other, right? Is that it's a little bit of a miss. Any other notes before we hop over to Legendaries?
Well, you have to use the Force to use his ability. It's even worse, right? Like, maybe if you didn't have to use the Force, I don't know. Yeah.
All right. Enough negative stuff. Let's talk about more negative stuff. Okay, so we have 20 Legendaries this set. Let's start with the easy ones. We're gonna all have to try to agree, so let's try to keep it civil here. Let's start with the easy one. Vader and S, we're all in agreement, right?
Yeah, I could see an argument for A, but yes.
If anything's an S, it's Vader. Do we agree there?
I think he's conditional A. I
I
agree he's A, right? Like, you have to build your deck to use him, right? To me, an S card is just always good. He's good.
He's great with ambush.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So let's go to the card that I probably think is the second best legendary in the set, and that's Anakin. Where's he going?
I see him as also A. He's going to fit in a lot of decks. You have to set him up to get the full value, to get his full benefit. We've been seeing that a lot in Kylo, and he's also really good when you have him set up. But he's not S because of the setup required.
Okay. There are definitely times where I want Anakin over Vader. And so I think because of that, having them both together like that, I mean, they're the same person, right? Having them both together like that seems about right.
So I guess let's work backwards then. Are there any legendaries in this set that you guys believe are S tier?
You'd have to scroll down. I just learned Grogu was a legendary.
I like Grogu.
So he's really annoying. We have Darth Malak. We have the Father. We have the constructed saber. We have Yoda, Leia, the big Mandalorian monster, Qui-Gon.
No, if I'm picking anything to be S tier strictly based on how they're used, without taking into account the fact that you have to set up to do it, Yoda's probably there, but I think the caveats I just gave you make him so he's A tier.
I have a hard time saying Yoda is better than Vader, generally speaking.
Yeah. And I don't think any of these are auto slam legendaries. Like, you don't automatically slam them into a deck and be like, all right, look, I made my deck. Because, in my opinion, they've done a pretty good job of actually balancing them this set.
Yeah.
None of these are Spark of the Rebellion Luke or Spark of the Rebellion Vader, where it's just like, no, that just goes in your deck. Am I playing Blue Hero? Then I'm playing Luke.
Yeah, I guess we would say, if we're talking about Vader in a blue-green ECL deck, S tier.
But that's the point. Yeah. What if I'm just playing a blue villain deck? Yeah, if he's going in a blue villain deck, is he necessarily going in? I don't know. It depends on what deck,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then with Yoda, as much as I'm high on him, and I think he has a great ability. Like, for instance, like, you probably wouldn't want to play Yoda in a Han 1 green build, right? Like, because then you have to incorporate the Force, right? So I could get down with these three. I do think, though, that these three are the best legendaries in the set.
I lean towards agreeing. I'm a little biased towards one more unit in a particular deck, and he's been good in a few others, but GI unit is an absolute unit.
So you think that he would be an A tier as well?
He's bottom of A, top of B for me. Being able to make the tribal Inquisitors hidden has been very good, even outside of a Grand Inquisitor deck. So I can see an argument for it being B. I'm not going to be upset if we put him in B, but he's also good enough that could be an A tier ability. So, same caveats as the other guys. You wouldn't put him in every deck, but in the decks you put him in, he does work.
But is it as much work as double activating Anakin's ability, or wiping a board with Vader, or healing and pinging with Yoda. Kyle, what's your take here?
Yeah, I think I think he's a step down from the three that we have here, right? I'm not sure I would put him all the way up at A. I think he's going to see a lot of play. I think he's a very good legendary. When you open your packs, you're not going to be sad when you get him.
Yeah.
So I don't see him at the same tier as the previous three.
Yeah,
the only thing I'll point out as a difference there is the cost. So for his cost, I think he actually does have the same impact. However, the higher costed units have to have a much bigger impact.
And he's a 3-cost unit, right, Sharky?
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I would have a hard time putting him in A. So I think Sharky, you're outvoted on this one. Kyle, you're going to pick one.
Good.
Yeah, going down here, it's a little hard to see. My apologies. I mean, we're going to see Qui-Gon played, right? I could see him.
I think he's a very good one.
Yeah, I think him and Grogu probably, work their way into B, kind of in this same range.
So I guess one of the questions with Qui-Gon is is he better than Han?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the deck you're playing, right? what your goal is. In general, I think I probably just want Han. But in a force-based deck, or if I'm trying to do looping, if I'm playing the Qui-Gon leader himself, I'm probably going to want the Qui-Gon unit. So he's going to have his, he's going to have his moments.
So I do think, though, at this point in the game, right, 7, 8 cost resources, even 6, like a majority of the units that you play are going to have an instant board impact, where I don't know how great it is to give someone the choice of putting a unit back on the top of their deck. That being said, like, I guess I would rather not have it in play, make him play it again.
So
but like when
let's put it this way.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you play Qui-Gon, you're not doing the same thing you want to do with Han. Qui-Gon comes down, eliminates a unit, and if he goes out at the same time, he takes another unit off the board. And suddenly the board that was looking pretty bad for you is now looking like it's at least reasonable.
Yeah.
He's basically a board reset for multiple units. And especially if they've upgraded one of them outside of, like, if he can't kill an 8 unit, he can run into a 7 power or 6 power unit, take that off the board, and then flip the other one off the board as well. So while I don't think he's as ubiquitous as Han, I do think that his uses are at least as impactful when you do use him.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general he's just a good, impactful leader that's going to see play, or legendary that's going to see play. And then, back to the rotation discussion right now, is he as good as Han? I think most of the time I'm going to want Han. Someday Han's going to be gone, and then this guy's going to be the standard in that slot.
Fair.
Absolutely.
Now we go on to your other mention, little Grogu, 1/6 for 3, pretty great ability, comes in hidden, it has the ability to heal up to 2 damage from a unit and assign that damage to someone else. Pretty custom made for any Han 2 build, right? I mean, I like it a lot. I know it's tough. He's not a Jedi. Maybe in my dream world, if he had the Jedi tag, he'd be a lot better. But I really like him as well. I think that he'll see a lot of play throughout the meta. I don't think it'll just be Han 2. I think that out of the B legendaries we spoke about so far, Inquisitor, Qui-Gon, and Grogu, I think Grogu will see the most play in different decks.
I could see that justification, and I would probably agree just based on early results. He is phenomenally annoying in Han 2. And he's so annoying in Han 2 that I think there's other ways to make it so that he would also trigger. So he can also be good in decks where you're trying to play unit-based control, have your unit attack into another unit to kill it, and then Grogu does the thing where he heals them and makes another unit go away. Really, really annoying, really, really powerful when you can set it up, but he does require a little bit more setup than I would say either of the two ahead of him in B tier.
Yeah. So let's go to some of the ones I think will inspire a little bit of debate. We have Marchion Ro, another High Republic character. Sharky, I have a feeling you're going to be arguing the pro on this, so make your case.
I can argue a pro on it. I think he actually fits right in there at C. He's strong when you get to use his ability. I think at this point, I'm only going to run one of him in CAD.
Okay. Might
go 2. I'm still testing. The ability is great. The 6 drop is not, but he comes in and he's got a big butt and he's pretty strong. So like he's not quite as impactful to me immediately as either Grand Inquisitor or Qui-Gon or even Grogu, but he does have an impact, and I don't think he's a trash tier. I think he's probably right in the very solid tier and will be one of those like $4 to $5 legendaries. Like to give it a comparison to some of the other ways you calculate it.
So I was gearing up for an argument if you wanted him at B or higher. I think C is appropriate. I think in CAD he fits pretty well. I think in raid-based yellow decks he has the potential to fit pretty well. But just right in that average spot for me. Kyle, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I was going to put him in that exact same area. I think he makes perfect sense. He's going to slam down in CAD probably and do some work.
All right, let's do some easy ones next. Bendu. We got a what's it? A 10-10 or an 11-10, 4-10, I believe. On attack, you get to exhaust, I believe, as well. I think this belongs in the F tier. I don't see a world that Bendu sees any competitive play.
How much does he cost again?
I was excited when you pulled up Bendu because I thought you were going to agree with me that he should. You agreed with me that he was going to be a C, and then you put him in C and drug him down. I was just about to agree with you and say, "Yep, he fits right in C."
So you think he's C? Okay, maybe I'm too hard. Is he not a 10 cost? Was I wrong there?
He's an 8 cost.
Okay.
Yeah, he only costs 8,
10.
right? So imagine him in like a Han 2, right? And then he's down to 7 or something like that. And he's a potential board wipe, right? He's a potential response to a space-based deck that you're having challenge with, right? Like he's a unit. He's a big threat with a built-in bombing run potentially on both sides. So I could see him being, at the very least a sideboard card, but interesting in some of these maybe hero red decks that, are trying to figure out a way to deal with space.
You know what? I was combining him with the Mandalorian Mythotar thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the on exhaust. His abilities on attack deal 3 damage to each other unit. So I could see that having a place, especially at only 8. I retract my previous statement. I was wrong. You were right. I'm man enough to admit it, Kyle.
Say it again?
No. Let's
it's
move on
now.
to the aforementioned
I agree, yeah.
Mandalorian. Is it Mythotar?
The Mythosaur.
Mythosaur. What do we thought? What are the thoughts here? What tier are we going? I put him in D just for some symmetry. Does anyone want to argue to move him up to C?
No,
I would argue to move him down, if anything.
Agreed. He's just a Zilla.
He's really cool looking. I don't see it. Even the decks that tend to do a lot of the cheating out of stuff, I don't believe are going to be running this guy.
Yeah.
I don't think he makes it in over Bendu, for example. The Mandalorian synergy leader doesn't really ever resource to 9, and when she does,
what a
maybe it's just me, but I don't see
Mandalorian
it.
trait was, right? Like I feel like they tried so hard in set 2 and it was such a whiff. Maybe this was their hope to bring it back, but
So yeah,
alas.
in the current environment, I would say not good. That doesn't mean that they can't make a better Mandalorian synergy thing later.
Yeah.
Current environment, I don't want to open.
Let's bring up another high cost unit here. We have the big ol' honking spaceship, Kyle. You're the resident blue-green master here. Does it get any play?
No. 12? Yeah, it costs too much, right? We're not going to see. This is a Twin Suns card to me, right? This is hey, we're going really long in Twin Suns. We're having some fun. I want to slam this giant thing, but it's for competitive play. This is at the bottom.
You know what's funny is
the best thing about this card is it's a force throw target.
Yeah,
sorry, what?
You just keep putting in your deck just for the force throw. During the coverage of I think it was the Minneapolis regional, I was watching C Raptor, and there was a game going long, and somebody whipped out. I think it was maybe Piet versus Kira or something like that, and someone finally whipped out an Executor and got it in the spot to be able to swing, right? And this is obviously a smaller unit than the Supremacy is bigger than the Executor, but he had it out there for the first time we were going to see it actually attack, and he spent an action doing something else before, and he got no glory. So it's like, you play it, you want to see these big honking spaceships have some impact. It just won't. I don't. Maybe in Piet, but again, 12 is crazy.
Let's compare this thing to Annihilator, which costs less.
Yeah. It's not as good.
What do you get? Yeah, what do you get for it? I honestly don't know.
You get ambush, I guess, is the one thing.
Annihilator deletes a unit. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe if you also put overwhelm next to the word ambush.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe.
So speaking of keywords and traits and stuff like that, we have our boy over here, the double green 1/5. I can't pronounce his name. I'll attempt to get a phonetical going here. It is Oppo Rancis. Yeah. He basically gets to borrow any trait or any keyword from somebody else. I think there is some possible play here, but it's probably fringe. Double green is really rough.
I know exactly what deck this goes in right now.
What deck is that?
Rex Unity.
Oh, okay, and just make that kind of the big guy and try to get some swarming going. I could see it, but is that enough to bring it out of D tier or maybe even out of F tier?
I think he goes bottom of C. He is at least above Supremacy. Supremacy might be F tier for me as well. So that's a different thing. But I do think he has.
Okay.
He has at least a couple of decks he could fit into right now before trying to build around him without even thinking about it. So that automatically makes him at least okay.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Let's go to one that design wise I'm pretty excited to see. Play wise I'm unsure, and that's Leia Organa in space, 5/5 force, can't ready in space but could be moved. Where do we want to put her? Kyle, you start.
I hated this scene in the movie. I'm going to be that guy. It's ridiculous. I know they wanted to make it to a card, and they found a way to make it happen, but I'm not playing this card, right? I got to play something that I can't attack with, and then I move it down for a temporary buff that, is easily played around if your opponent can see it coming. This is an F. This card's a coaster.
Yeah, I think this
Do we know if she has a prestige?
Of course she's gonna. Every force.
I don't think everyone will.
I think every force unique will, but I guess we'll see. I think that she could be okay on like a Kaz green because you can untap there at the end of the phase. Outside of that, it's.
I was gonna say D tier. I think she's slightly better than the other two, which
I could accept that.
That's not a good bar to clear, but it is technically a bar.
Let's move on to another low bar, and that's the Legacy Run, another High Republic card. Great looking ship here. A 3/3 for 5. When defeated, deals 6 damage to a unit or amongst enemy units. Kyle, could I interest you in a situational expensive barrage?
You're going to try it in Thrawn, right? Like that's that card says Thrawn yellow. There's a couple cards here that say I work in this deck. Grogu says Han too, right? Yep. This card says Thrawn yellow. So, it's got its purpose. You'll see it played in that deck specifically. So it's probably C, right? It's, D means it's not getting played. F means I should rip it up. So C means, there's a deck for it. Kind of like the dude to the left of it there.
And Sharky's given us the C. So we'll take that and we will move on.
It also goes in Palp Yellow very well, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, you could throw it. That's pretty good. Yeah. And Palp Yellow didn't need any new toys. They got a lot in set 4, so that's always
it might not make the cut, but it can at least be played there.
Yeah, so here's one that I just mentioned earlier on, and it's there are always 2 of them, right? I think
love it.
I think that's situational, but I do think if you let that happen to you, you're probably not winning that game. It's called always 2. Choose 2 friendly Sith units. If you do, give 2 shield tokens and 2 experience tokens to each of the chosen units. Defeat all friendly units.
Yeah. And to me, this is just harder. The Force is with me, right? The Force is with me has seen some play. It can be good in certain situations. This is just requiring me to get a similar benefit, but set it up first. So D to me, or whatever. Yeah, D.
I think low C is fine also, personally, just because it is impactful when it hits. And it has an impact in such a way that it can win you a game. It takes some setup. It's a little more setup required than the Forces with me. But it's the same cost, and honestly, I would say it's higher than Leia. But
I definitely think at bare minimum it's higher than Leia. The question is it better than Legacy Run?
I don't think so. I don't see it getting played.
Probably not.
Is it closer to Legacy Run than it is to Leia?
In my opinion, yes.
In my opinion, yes, also.
I'll get outvoted.
I do agree that it's very similar to the Forces with me. I do think, though, if you're not playing if you're playing a deck that doesn't have straight up removal, this is going to be a pain, right? There's lightsabers. They're highly statted units. Some of them come in ready with Darth Malak, which we'll talk about now. So Darth Malak is a 4/7 Sith. When he comes in, if there is another Sith, he readies, right? So this is another one of, I think, Knights of the Old Republic. So people really do like him, and he has Overwhelm. So he's a 4/7 for 5. That's a pretty healthy stat line, I would say. Like Rey has that stat line. It reminds me of Zori Bliss a little bit. Thoughts and general feelings about Mr. Malak?
I like him better than Always 2. I actually think I like him better than Legacy Run, and if we're going to keep going up that, he might be just below Bendu for me. And it's not just because of the Revan decks. He actually is very good in Asajj Ventress, the Shadows deck as well. There's a few other Sith leaders I think that he would play very well in. I don't remember off the top of my head, but those two come to mind, and he has an impact there in such a way that I'm like, he's actually solid.
I'd move him up one more, even, probably over Bendu.
Okay, I can see that. And I
think I prefer Marky into him, but still.
Yeah, just a great stat line. 5-4-7 with a good ability. I do think that if I had to pick between him and Tyrannus, I'm likely playing Tyrannus, even though they're statted incredibly differently. I'm interested to see how this looks prestige-wise. I know people love Malik.
Oh, the prestige looks great. They've shown that one off. Or was that one of the... they might have shown off the Galactic version. I can't remember. They showed off some fancy version of Malik, and it looked awesome.
So you're talking about
one of the play lines.
The special version you said was... What? All right, we'll have to look it up.
They've showed up both. So one of the play lines you can do in sequence here is Tyrannus into Malik into always 2. And that's actually, if you haven't died by that point and or the units still live, that's a pretty devastating way to clear a board and benefit from it and push the advantage.
Absolutely. And that's
kind of magical Christmas land in my experience, but it's pretty cool when it works.
I think that's fair. Another one that's probably kind of cool when it works, but I'm not sure. Sharky, I know you're a little disappointed about the way Zuckuss was designed for this set.
Well, it's missing one key trait for me to want to play him ever. And I'm willing to bet there might be a deck out there that plays him, but I have not been interested in a double yellow force deck yet. And that might be all I have to say about him, which tells you how I am. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's one Zuckuss.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to start, when we saw this, I think a lot of people were saying Zuckuss is force, and there is a backstory there. There is some lore there that shows that. Double yellow is a tough one to fit, but the lack of underworld, I think, is the really, really big trump card here, because it's just because, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Sharky, but wouldn't this Zuckuss enable Forlom?
Yes.
Okay, so are we in D? We in F? We in C?
F. Hard F. That card is, I don't know what they were thinking. All I learned from this card is that Zuckuss is force sensitive. This card gets no play.
Sharky, you cool with that?
I don't think he gets
want to
play.
Protest?
I don't protest. I don't think he does anything. I reserve the right to change that if there's a card that says, look at your opponent's top card.
Okay.
Like, all it takes is one card to change that, one card, and it makes it very good.
Well, that card exists, right? It's called, the Thrawn.
Yeah, play Admiral Thrawn, but like, I mean, a card, not a leader.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have the constructed saber here. Kind of cool how it gives you a different boost for villainy and heroic. I think there are better upgrades to play. I think in limited, this is going to be great. I think in constructed, I see it pretty firmly in that C tier. It's going to see some play. I think it's clearly better than Leia, but I would have it at the end of this tier for me.
I would try to argue it up to B almost.
Okay.
Myself. I think we're going to see this card a lot. You guys might disagree with me, but it's definitely, if you're going to have to wedge it down into C, it'll be towards the top end of C for me. This card is flexible, useful, and I think you're going to see it in a few different decks.
All right, Kyle, you're the deciding fact here, Sharky.
I think the flexibility is what's going to push it to B tier for me.
Okay.
It's solid but unassuming in a lot of ways, and it does a lot of good things. One thing to remember that I keep seeing people trying to force is that it only attaches to a force unit. So if you don't have a force unit, you can't play it. That being said, it's a whole set about force units, and it fits in very well with that. Solid card.
Yeah.
B tier works.
Here's one I was really hopeful for, and that's the Father. I'm going to just put it in C for now. I might be on D, to be honest. He's 8 cost, 5/10. When you use the force, you may deal 1 damage to this unit. If you do, the force is with you. I really think this is only going to work in an Avar style deck, and I haven't wanted to play it at all. And I don't know. Am I too negative? I just don't see it.
The art's cool.
I mean, yeah. He's a cool character. The art's cool. He's an F to me.
You think? Okay, so you think he's worse than Leia?
He costs way too much. He's not going to get. What deck does he go in? He's just for what he costs, for what he does. If I'm going to pay 8 for something, it better do something amazing, not just maybe give me the force.
That's fair. And I was hopeful that we would see some of that trio, father, daughter, son, all that stuff going on. We're not going to see it. Maybe the daughter, but
off the rip, I'm playing Zuckuss over that guy.
Okay, we'll put Zuckuss
If I'm
below
paying,
then.
it has to do something immediately and impactful for 8.
Eight's a lot. 8 is a lot. All right, let's go somewhere a little cheap, and that's HK. Sharky, I know you're a fan of him from the game as well. Take it over.
I love the character so much. I have yet to find a deck that works. I've heard there are a few out there. I think he's bottom of C tier currently. I reserve the right to change that when I find a way to absolutely abuse him.
Kyle?
I think you're going to see him in villain aggro decks. He's going to be around, right? You can try him in.
Yeah, I think he's solid.
Yeah, there's any of these villain red aggro decks, he definitely gives a go, right? So I think he's solid. I think you'll see him, in that style deck.
Fair stat line. I think that's one thing that red villainy has been lacking a little bit. Like, one of our teammates, Nico, still plays Vader 1 for whatever reason. And, it's tough to find good 2-drops to put in there. This doesn't die. It has a good stat line. Vader, yeah. Is it legendary? I don't know. I'm happy for people that are real big fans of him, but to me, it didn't really.
His one-liners are legendary.
What's the one-liner?
It just calls people meatbags most of the time. But
okay.
I'll look it up later when it does.
That
but he's
into
just
the
fun.
vernacular. We'll start it. Okay, our last one is Cal Kesta. I think it's pronounced, right? How do you pronounce this guy's name?
Syndralic.
I was wrong. What do we think about his ability? It's tough. He's expensive. I just call him lightsaber bro at this point, but I think he's in the range of in the limited environment, but he's very expensive and upgrades are kind of, fragile in this game.
I think he's in the Bendu range. Would put him probably, I could see an argument above or below, but in the same vicinity as Bendu. And one of the reasons for that is that I think he isn't played immediately on 8 for his jam it, but he is a good recovery from a super laser blast if you got a saber in hand.
That is true.
And so that's the best use case I can find for him at the moment, and he's just solid otherwise. How often he gets played, I'm actually not sure.
Kyle?
Yeah, for me, if I'm trying to bring him in, I'm trying to close things out. I don't know. Is he better than Mace Party Crasher for 1 less?
Probably not.
Probably not, right? I think I'd rather just play Mace. If I'm getting up towards 8, he's kind of got the same problem. At least he has a win played, that readies him up, right? Readies him up. So, he's not as bad as the father, but, I think he's just outclassed. I would probably push him down to D myself. I don't really see it.
I think he's better than Leia, right? But is he dramatically better than Leia? I'm not sure. So as we just look overall, I think it was really easy towards the top for us to agree, right? Like Vader, Anakin, and Yoda. I think if there's one thing that we look back at this regretting is just underestimating how good Vader is a little bit. Obviously, we're saying he's great. We're saying he's the best in the set, in the right situation. How often does that situation happen? How much does the meta shift to surround this situation? That's going to be an interesting question as we go through the coming months.
I'm personally a fan of the fact that there isn't set 1 Vader or Luke auto slam to S tier. I like the fact that they're starting to make it they're doing a better job of balancing among what I think is the new paradigm for that. Yeah. And I think they did a good job of nailing it, that he's very powerful and you have to do some setup to make him very powerful.
Yeah. All right, well, that's all we got for today. We got the leaders gone through. We got the legendaries gone through. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to try to print out some proxies, get some more gameplay coming for you. We had the stream from Dungeons and Javas last week. You check it up on the channel if you need 11 hours of moderately entertaining entertainment. Most of the moderate from me, most of the good from Josh at Next Gen Gaming. And then we got some other stuff coming here. We're working on a stream setup for Kyle at his house, and we're just really set up to have a great rest of the summer, banging out some Star Wars Unlimited content for you. So for Kyle, for Sharky, I'm Jordan. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon for some gameplay.